So welcome everybody. My name is Janet Morris-Reed. I am the chair of BC Plan, and I am also the CEO of Aspect, which is the Association of Service Providers for Employability and Career Network. Just a reminder, BC Plan stands for BC Prior Learning Action Network, and we are a network. And if you are interested in joining us, you can go to our website, which is at bcplan.ca, to join us and to find out more about the work we're doing. We are really delighted. This is our first webinar for the organization. And after this webinar, what you can expect to receive from us is a recording of the webinar. So this is a reminder that we are recording it in case anybody is worried about that. You will receive a post-webinar survey to give us some feedback so that we can better meet your needs in the future, as well as a copy of the slides. And if there's any questions that aren't answered within the context of this 1 hour we are together, we will provide you with answers to any outstanding questions. So with that, I would like to introduce some of the people on the call that you should know. The first person is Andrew Skipenko. He is the operations manager for BC Prior Learning Action Network. We're very happy to have him. And Justine Arsenal is also with us. She is one of the board members of BC Plan and works at BCIT. And of course, my next honor is to introduce our presenter today. So I will try to do this without messing up your name, Susan. So I'm very pleased to have Susan Forseille. I did it. I got it in my head. I'm so sorry. Susan Forseille, who is the vice chair of BC Prior Learning Action Network. And she is the director of prior learning assessment and recognition at Thompson Rivers University. She has 22 years as a career educator and an enthusiastic researcher. Susan has been privileged to work in and conduct research around multiple intersections of career development, prior learning, and education. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Simon Fraser University, a Master of Education from Thompson Rivers University, and is currently completing her PhD with the University of Leicester. Susan is a passionate PLAR advocate. She sits on the national body, CAPLA, as a board member, and she is an advocate for believing that adult learners acquire great amounts of knowledge and skills through life and work experience. Now, if you would like, we've set this up as a meeting so that we've removed all barriers for you to ask questions and also to have a conversation if we need to. But if you don't feel like speaking out, you can use our chat function and put your questions in there. Andrew and I will be monitoring them. And depending on the breaks, we will every once in a while break into Susan's presentation just to make things interesting for her. So I would like to welcome you all and to Susan Forseille for presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to open up. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you very much for that introduction. You've covered a lot of what I was going to share, just a little bit about myself. I am fairly new to the PLAR world in that I started as the director's job about 3 years ago. And prior to that, I was a PLAR assessor. And so I learned a little bit through that PLAR assessment work, but it's really been the last 3 years that I've been able to look at PLAR and that focus or concentration. So before we start, I was just hoping you could put in the chat feature your name, your job title, and your organization. And while you're doing that, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. And I found this picture from, we have some new statues here at TRU and Kamloops, and it's a wolf pack. And I thought that was so appropriate for today because as the Schwetniks say, so I'm honored to be a welcomed but uninvited settler on the Kamloops to Schwetnik territory. And the purpose of land acknowledgements, or the value I really find in it, is to help us understand the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land, and to seek to understand our place in this history. And one of the values I really like from the Schwetnik language is this phrase they have about meaning to everyone come together to help each other. And that's a lot of what the Wolfpack does. And that's our intent today, and our intent with BC Plan is to come together and help each other. And so I'm going to share some information on research I've been doing on prior learning assessment, specifically where it intersects with career development. And so yeah, I'm pretty honored, and this is all very, very new research I'm sharing today. And so I'm a little nervous, and I had this presentation finished on the weekend, and then when I went to practice it last night, I changed quite a bit. So I'm even more nervous now because I'm worried I've got typos, but anyways, we'll proceed and see how it goes. Quickly, I just wanted to share an intersection with my learning, and I use that word learning intentionally. My first career job when I left University SFU was I worked at a heritage site just north of Cache Creek called Hat Creek Ranch. And I started off as a historic interpreter. I coordinated the history interpretation program. So small, maybe 3 people worked under me. And within a year, I had the heritage site. I was managing it as a contract for the province. And I remember saying that my learning curve was so steep. So I went from a history degree with very little experience to running a gift shop, having a ranching operation. We had sales and marketing. We had a restaurant. We had contracts with some of the ranchers around us. So I often joked my 5-6 years at Hat Creek Ranch was my master's of business. I had no idea what I was saying then, because PLAR really does work in that realm. After I left the ranch, I started to work as a career counselor, and spent the rest of my career in that world till I left PLAR. And I know that there's a number of people on the webinar today that are from the career practitioning world. And I thought it was important for you to know that I really spent a lot of time in that world and just recently stepped out. But my PhD is still on that research. And what my PhD is on is how PLAR impacts career development. And what I'm doing is I'm comparing traditional students that haven't gone through PLAR, so those students that leave high school, go to university, what does their career development look like compared to people that have a lot of prior learning and are coming back to education later in their life. And I think I've been at TRU for just over 15 years now. And I have a very ambitious goal today. Doesn't that look busy? But don't worry, the first few slides I'm going to go through fairly quick. And when Janet and Andrew and I were talking about the format for today, we thought it was important to just go over some of the basic PLAR elements for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Hopefully it'll help situate what really is prior learning assessment and recognition, and how is it done and who does it in the province. And then you can see for the 6th piece, that's where there's quite a few more slides, and that's where I'm going to spend more time today. And then I'm going to end with just a few thoughts on how career practitioners can help clients learn about PLAR, and how you can help them identify and document prior learning. So sound good? Okay, excellent. I can't see very many people, so we're going to go with yes, I got the thumbs up. So I'll start with the real basics, and that is, what is PLAR? And PLAR is this amazing process that allows students to identify, document, and I'm just going to change my view here for a minute. Identify, document, and have assessed in a very rigorous and robust way their prior learning. And I'm going to go into what prior learning is in a little bit, to gain either academic credit or advanced entry into an academic program. Now, PLAR is done in different ways. And so, for example, BC, what is it? The Dental Hygiene Association, they do PLAR. Registered professional foresters do PLAR. So some of those organizations do it as well, but I'm only talking about it today in the context of post-secondary institutions. And as I said, that prior learning assessment can and does result in either credit or advanced entry into a program. So let's say that you're looking at a 2-year program in marketing, but you already have 5 or 6 years in position with marketing duties. There may be a chance that you've already learned some of that information, and you can, instead of taking the first 2 years or taking the 2-year program, maybe you can miss the first semester or the first 2 semesters, depending on the institution. And then, of course, there is no common reference in Canada or across the world for what is PLAR. In BC, we affectionately call it PLAR, Prior Learning Assessment and Recognition, but you've probably heard other names. So you might have heard PLA, Prior Learning Assessment. They've left the recognition out. Recognition of Prior Learning, RAC, which is a French terminology, and just little side note, Quebec does excellent work with prior learning assessment. And then APEL, which is accreditation of prior and experiential learning. And then just to complicate it a little bit more, other schools we've noted call it challenge for credit with permission of the dean or flexible entry. So it can be hard to really pinpoint what is PLAR when we all are using a different vocabulary or vernacular. So next, I'm just going to spend really quick time going into the different types of learning: formal, informal, and non-formal. So formal is the one that we're most used to, and that's usually occurs in an organized and structured environment, such as the post-secondary institutions. So, think about Douglas College or University, University of the Fraser Valley. I think I've got that all completely mixed up. Simon Fraser University, University of Victoria. And what sets apart these formal learning is that they're usually recognized by relevant provincial or federal authorities. And there's a standardization of qualifications in the degrees, diplomas, and certificates. So that's the one that we're most familiar with. And then I'm going to use 2 other terms a lot today: informal learning and non-formal. And there's subtle differences between informal learning and informal learning. We've done since day one. It's how we acquire language, and it's so much more, but it results from daily life activities related to work, family, hobbies, interests, or just that nature of living. And when I talk about PLAR and informal learning, some of the examples that come to mind is, for example, my daughter's boyfriend just bought a house, thank goodness, before the bubble went up, but and he's renovating it. And so he's doing his kitchen right now, and he has to do quite a bit of the electrical work and even just the construction of the cabinets and whatnot. And he'll go online and he'll find tutorials, and he'll watch them, he'll read it, and he'll do it, and then he'll learn from that. So that self-study, and it's all around us. So he, like I said, he's read articles. He did participate in some handyman forums. This also some coaching, mentoring sessions, but this informal learning is all around us. And most of the time it's very, very subconscious, and we don't even realize we're doing it. I'm thinking of the first time I made cinnamon buns and I forgot to put in the yeast, and I learned that lesson quickly. Or when I was making my mom's chili recipe, and I was saying you can never screw up chili, and I put cinnamon in it instead of other spices, and it's like, yeah, okay, you'll learn from that too. And non-formal learning takes up a lot of space in the PLAR world. So this is the learning that you're not getting formal recognition for, and it often occurs in organizations. So for example, the last PLAR advisor that we hired, she went through about 6 months of training where we walked her through processes, talked a lot about how we do things, how we operationalize it, we mentored her, we coached her, so there was some formal training that we did with her, some informal stuff. And then I sent her to a couple of workshops in the United States, CAL being one of them, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. And they do some sessions on how to do PLAR assessment. And it can come from non-credit courses. So I used to teach courses on how to write your memoirs. There could be courses or learning that comes from that. Attending conferences, we've all missed the face-to-face conferences recently. Thank goodness we've got webinars because that's filling the void. But even in today's session, you can see there's learning that's going to happen. MOOCs, massive open online courses. There's some really big organizations out there that are offering courses, sometimes free, sometimes very cheap. And holy crow, there's a range of options to take. There's some really good ones out there. And the traditional workshops. So that non-formal learning, again, it's very prevalent. And what PLAR does, this next slide here, it's all about living in that land of non-formal and informal learning. And we help the students identify it, recognize it, and then we can have it validated for either advanced entry into a program or for credit. So I'm just going to ask, does that make sense to everybody? Janet, maybe you could monitor the chat room and let me know if anybody has any questions on the different types of learning.
No questions here, but I am monitoring it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I've got this. Oh, I love this image. What happens with PLAR is that we work with students to deconstruct that informal and non-formal learning. So what did you learn? How did you learn it? Why did you learn it? How were you building on that learning? And so we help them deconstruct it and then reflect on it. PLAR has extensive reflection built into it. And then we help them codify it or build it back up for academic purposes. And I'm going to go through the different types of PLAR in a moment, but one of the types of PLAR is called course-based PLAR. And that's where you get the learning objectives from a course, and then you somehow demonstrate that you've acquired that learning outside of formal education. And this image I'm about to show you, it's Legos, and we'll just wait till it gets to that pile at the bottom. I thought I had this queued up proper. But you can see this big pile of Legos, and what we do is we help deconstruct that learning with the students so they can build it back up and use the vocabulary and the learning outcomes that the institutions are learning. And I thought this image itself just really helped give a visual aid to what this looks like. Nothing to do with me loving to play with Legos. And then this next slide is really, really important. PLAR is predicated on this foundation. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on the experience. And so this is a really difficult concept for both students and sometimes faculty to get, and that we can't give PLAR credits out for experience. So if a student gives us a resume and they say, I worked for 15 years in the armed forces, and these are the responsibilities I had, that's really excellent learning, but we need the student to be able to reflect on those experiences and then to be able to pull out what they learned from it. And I just really wanted to articulate that clearly. This is the most important feature of PLAR that is out there, and it blends into a lot of the other slides I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment and I'm going to ask you a question. So based on this little bit of information that I've shared on PLAR and what you already know about prior learning assessment, in the chat, do you mind just putting in a few words on what is the value in having your informal and non-formal learning assessed and validated? And Janet, if you wouldn't mind just verbalizing some of the answers when they come up.
Sure.
I feel blind here.
There's nothing there quite yet, but I really think that the reflection part is a huge deal. And we've noticed it in adult education as well, is that quite often when we're asked to write assignments, it's not to report back on what we've learned, but how it applies to us and how we're going to use the information in the future. And we have some comments here that Chilan from Work BC Vernon said, builds confidence in clients. Yes, that's true. Recognition, this is from Shannon Tom from Work BC Williams Lake.
Oh, hi, Shannon.
Recognition that not all learning happens in a formalized setting or way. Amanda says the value of having PLAR assessed and validated. Oh, I've just lost it. Hold on a second. I think where we go. It jumped up. Just one second. The value of having PLAR assessed and validated saves time, money for students, and gives PSIs opportunity to open space seats for more students to learn. Great point. Justine says promotes lifelong learning. Rajiv says that helps provide more flexible pathways into formal education, especially for non-traditional students. Yeah, Gabriella says you realize that you know more than you think. Very good point.
That sums it up so well.
And Gail says it helps individuals with self-worth and realizing how much they do know. Kareem says provides different avenues and opportunities to those that did not go through traditional education.
What excellent thoughts. And it's so nice to hear this, because a lot of what I'm going to cover is we're really going to quantify some of those answers and show you how we know this is the case. What is the research showing us? And we know PLAR is a fairly new entity, really maybe going back to the 70s for many institutions, and many not even that. But so the research is light in certain areas still. And so it sounds like intuitively we know that there's lots of benefits, but how can we prove it? So excellent thoughts. And I thought I would just take a moment to talk about the different types of PLAR and blend in some research that BC Plan did 2 summers ago. We received funding to do research on the state of PLAR in the province. So we looked at the 25 post-secondary institutions, and we wanted to know how they were doing PLAR, what types of PLAR they were doing, and how they were assessing and whatnot. So from that research, we've broken it into there's course-based on course-based PLAR, and you can see with the number at the bottom there, 20 of 25 schools do this. And that's where students demonstrate they've met the course learning outcomes. And how they demonstrate that learning, it can be in an exam, it can be in an interview, it can be in samples of work, or a demonstration of skill or portfolio. At TRU, we're quite happy to do the portfolios, but usually with another element built into it. So it might be a portfolio in an interview, or a portfolio and evidence provided from people that can attest to that learning. So course-based, as you can tell, is quite common. Competency-based is very few schools do this, just a handful, 4 of the 25. And this is getting at the graduate attributes that post-secondary institutions say their students graduate with. And we think of the human skills, soft skills, or yesterday, Janet, we heard it called as the power skills. So those would be, for example, at TRU, we say when a student graduates from TRU, they have intellectual maturity, they have good decision-making skills, they're independent learners, they're critical thinkers and problem solvers, they have strong communication skills. And so how competency-based PLAR is done, and this KPU does it this way, TRU does it this way, the other schools do it very similar, is that we look at how do we measure, how do we assess those human skills, and then we give them block credit for it. So at TRU, they'll do a fairly large portfolio, sometimes as much as 100, 120 pages. And everything has to be evidence. So when they talk about their communication skills or their intellectual maturity, they need to provide evidence of it. So again, maybe it's a letter of reference, maybe it's a marketing piece that they've written, maybe it's feedback from other sources, maybe it's samples of work they've done. So there's all sorts of ways they can evidence it. But once they complete the portfolio, then they also go through an interview with 2 PLAR assessors that ask them questions. And then they can get elective credit, depending on their program of study and how much elective room's in there and how many other courses they've taken. Sometimes it's only 6 or 9 credits, but sometimes it can be significantly higher. So I think the most we've ever given for this type of PLAR is 75 credits, with just 2.5 years. And then 6 of the 25 schools said that they do advanced placement, and that's where they'll do an assessment of students' prior learning and then help decide whether they need to take that first year or that first semester, or for Royal Roads, it's even, do you need that undergraduate degree or can you go right into the master's? So the advanced placement can really save students time and money because they have less school, and they're not wasting their time because they've already demonstrated that they have parts of this learning, so they don't have to start at the beginning. And then just 2 students do the credit bank, or 2 universities do the credit bank. And that's where we go in and we pre-assess training. So it might be select employers or private schools, or even we've done it for continuing studies at other universities. And we'll look at things like lesson plans and syllabuses, and how is the students learning assessed? What are the instructors' qualifications? What feedback do they get? What is the latest pedagogy in this field of study? Are they meeting that? Is it current? It's quite a process, but with students, we send our assessors in, or faculty members go in and assess it, subject matter experts. And then when students apply to TRU, if they can prove they did that training from that institution or that organization, they automatically get credit towards that program of study that they're in. So just quickly, I wanted to share some of the types of PLAR, and then I'll just go backwards and you'll see, as I said, we've got the numbers at the bottom. So who's doing that? And it can be hard to navigate who's doing what PLAR in the province. Most of the schools don't have centralized offices, so it can be really hard to navigate it with your clients. So what we've done on the BC Plan website is we've listed all of the schools that we did this research on, and we did look at the 25 schools in the province. And then on the side here where it says KPU, I just pulled open an example of what you'll find on the website. So you'll find out where the PLAR landing page is, some information on application requirements, how do students apply, fees, whatever we were able to find, as much of the one-stop shopping as possible. So I thought this was an excellent project for us to do. And I know other provinces have looked at it and really want to emulate it. So we were leading the pack there. Okay, remember I said when we get to number 6, this is where I'm going to spend my most time. And I put the iceberg there. We thought it was important to talk a little bit about PLAR and contextualize it. What is it? Where is it done? How is it done? But now I'm excited to dive into the meat of this and talk about what are the benefits of students going through PLAR on career advancement. But first, I'm hoping you'll just indulge me a little bit because I have 4 slides I want to share to kind of set the stage. So first slide I wanted to talk about is changes in our labor market. And when I was practicing this last night, I was telling my daughter, she was my audience, I was saying 4 and 5 years ago that there's structural changes in the labor market that we're living through. And I had people laughing at me saying I was really exaggerating. And now I'm hearing that phrase a lot. We are living through historic and monumental times. There is no other time in the history of the world that we've gone through so much change so quickly. And that's really playing out in our labor market. And so this chart here looks at the 4 industrial revolutions, just a really quick overview, talking about when the Industrial Revolution first started in the mid 1700s, kind of, you get your steam engine and your mechanical pieces. But more importantly is what skills were really needed for someone to find work in that Industrial Revolution. And so that physical labor was still really important. And if you had basic engineering skills, you could find work quite easily and quite readily. And slowly things change. So we come up to more electricity, mass production, more divisions of labor. And then you see the skills that are helping people get work there. It's the business skills to reduce the risk, more standardization. And this is a word we may never come back to again, certainty. There is certainty and predictability in the labor market. Jump ahead to the 1970s when we first started doing computing work, and it changed things dramatically. And you started to see the need for deep expertise and the STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And then, of course, the fourth industrial revolution, where we are today, you can see it's much different in terms of the skills or the talents that people need, and learning agility and adaptability and making sense of all these changes. And what does that mean to them and to their career development? And we're moving away from disciplinary to interdisciplinary. So it's great to have an engineering degree now, but you might want to combine that with maybe something to do with technology, or it's excellent to have a business degree where you're majoring in HR, but you might want something else to offset that. So, it's more holistic and looking. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we had COVID. And, I really hope, well, I won't even start talking about that. But what COVID did was it really accelerated the patterns that we were already experiencing. And so, for example, we knew technology with microcomputing and augmented reality and quantum computing and nanoparticles and cryogenics and 6G communications. We knew all that was coming. We knew it was going to impact the labor market. We knew automation was there. What we didn't expect was it to happen so fast. And so we look at 45% of the jobs today are vulnerable to automation, 15% are at high risk. And where we thought we might have a 3 or 4 year window, COVID has exacerbated that. It might only be a 1 or 2 year window. And then you look at those that traditionally have more barriers to employment. So youth and immigrants have been hit particularly hard with COVID, as have women. We knew youth and immigrants were struggling in the labor market. Women, that surprised us a little bit. And there's the talk about the she recovery and just the impact of women on their work and their lives. And you think about, okay, so now we're telling them they need to reskill and upskill to keep employed. How's that going to impact them? And then, as we see from this chart, there's less and less work for those people with low and middle skills, and more work for those people with higher skills. And that bleeds right into my next slide about credential creep and the growing need for advanced education. So as we all know, we're moving from the natural resource economy into the knowledge economy. And I grew up in Williams Lake. I saw the impact on the mills and logging and what it's done now with tourism being decimated. But Work BC, in conjunction with BC Stats, have looked at the work in up to 2029. And this is a pretty clear illustration of the need for more education. So 77% of jobs will require some sort of post-secondary education in just 8 years. So that might not be a bachelor's degree. It might be a certificate or a diploma. And of course, the trades is still really important. But those numbers were unheard of. Those numbers, even 15 years ago, might have only been 30% of people need advanced education. So we've seen significant changes in the need for post-secondary, and there's still, post-secondary education is still one of those really important currency to validate learning, and that employers are still looking at to know if the skill set is there to fit the jobs that they have. And then, so we talk a little bit about the structural changes in the labor market, credential creep, and then you combine that with lifelong learning and living longer. And the bottom of this chart shows the old paradigm where at the beginning of your life, maybe from 5, 6 years old to about 20, depending on if you went on to post-secondary or further education, that part of your life ended very abruptly in the mid-20s on average. And then you worked, yay, freedom 55, freedom 65. and really relative limited change. It was pretty static. I think they've exaggerated that, how static it was. But then, you retire, your life expectancy was 70, 75 years. And look up to the above part of this chart, and holy crow, it's changed. And that's where lifelong learning, because we're having more jobs, quicker changes, and the skills we used to have maybe need to be updated or adopted, or maybe we just want a different career path. And so the learning is now across our lifespan, hence lifelong learning. Even once we get into these higher ages, and the need and the want to remain engaged, we're living longer. I heard 2 years ago for the first time the terminology, the 100-year career, and it was based on the kids that were being born then and now we predict that they'll live to be 120, 130. Some are saying even older. So our life expectancy is older. The rate of change is much quicker. Hence, we need to keep changing our skills that we have to remain employable. And then the last thing I want to talk about, kind of to set this all up for PLAR and how that impacts career development or career enhancement, is to look at some of the older thoughts on career versus present. And so I put in the Dodge trucks from the 1980s, kind of where we are today, to holy crow, what are we going to be driving in 2025? And it feels like a science fiction movie. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think it's enough to say that our career development is much more dependent on us now, not who we're working for and what they say. It's not nearly as predictable or linear as it was. The rates of change are much quicker. What we want out of career, I remember my dad, he worked for the railway, and he booked off sick every chance he could get. He just hated his job. And I asked him once, well, then why do you stay there? And, he was floundered. He had no pre-concept that his job was anything more than a way to supply an income. And he shouldn't be happy there. It was just something he had to do to get to that paycheck. And, you look at the generations today, and it's all about valuing what you're doing and having that say and that fulfilling and being able to learn and to be able to explore and expand yourself. It's much different. And yeah, so I don't think I need to go into a lot here. I think most of us understand how careers have changed, but that is a really important triangulation when you look at PLAR and what that has to do with career development. So you may be asking yourself, excellent. So that overview on structural changes in the labor market, education or credential creep, lifelong learning, the changes in just our personal career planning and personal career goals. So here we go. We'll go into what does this have to do with PLAR.
Okay, before we do that, Susan, I just wanted to read off some of the messages we've had. Joel, we were talking about retirement, and Joel said he's on the Freedom 95 plan right now. So I thought that was pretty funny. And he also says that his 25-year-old son and 20-year-old daughter are also looking at multiple careers in their lifetime, and that recognition is importance of being happy in what they do. So yeah. That's great. And I just also want to let you know that we only have 20 minutes left.
Okay, and we're good. I've got about 10 minutes left of content. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so how does PLAR impact career development? So we know that you're going, in general, and I'll use the royal we need more education. And so I think it was either Maribel or Justine had said, PLAR certainly supports education attainment. So it's less expensive. It's another pathway to post-secondary education. It can be a quicker way to get that education. And students have also commented on it's a more flexible way to get your education, so they can keep working and pick away at courses here and there, and it's not such a big impact on their other responsibilities. Most PLAR students are over the age of 24, 25, they've started their families or have caregiving responsibilities for their parents, or they're involved heavily in the community. So, they've got a lot of demands on their time. A few things that others may not know, PLAR increases GPA. So students that go through PLAR versus students who don't, their GPA tends to be about a letter grade higher. And this is research done out of the United States with 2,400 participants. So the survey size was really big. And then I'll just echo, we emulated that research at TRU and we found the exact same findings. So their GPA goes up at least a letter grade. And completion rates go up as well. And at TRU, we found about 17% increase in completion rates. And they were quicker to complete as well. And that's probably because they had a chunk of credits already recognized and they didn't have to take parts of their education. And as we talk much more today about equity and access, and when we were doing the chat in the beginning, some people mentioned this. And so, maybe you didn't have that chance to go to post-secondary when you finished high school, or you didn't want to leave your town. And, there wasn't a lot of options for many of us when we finished high school. Either we didn't have the money or we didn't want that lifestyle, or it was just too hard to pick up and leave. And recent research has shown that PLAR opens up a lot of equity and access to those who wouldn't traditionally look at post-secondary. And most important, as I talked about with post-secondary education really being a strong currency, PLAR makes your learning visible, not just to yourself, but to others. So to others in the labor market. And so many times we have students that say, okay, I've got 15 years experience with this organization. I can't get to the next level of my career unless I have a degree. And so, we help them through that pathing. And then, as many of you also mentioned, the impact of PLAR on the individual. And this, as I said, that self-reflection is such a core component on the learning. So you have to reflect on that experience to help understand the learning that came from it. And this is just some of the research that shows, and the research, I have the sources at the end, but I wanted to summarize it. So it shows increased self-awareness, significant increase in confidence, especially in confidence in yourself, confidence in your knowledge, confidence in your skills. It legitimizes that prior learning that you have. And it goes back to that currency of post-secondary. Some interesting research has shown that it helps people think more coherent and more clearly about themselves and about their professional identities and about their career development. Higher levels of self-understanding, self-acceptance, and self-esteem. Really, this one surprised me. I haven't seen any research that has pointed me to this before, but more receptive to future learning. So that lifelong learning is important. And as I said already, the increased sense of personal and professional self. So just on the impact of PLAR on the person, you can see how that would greatly impact career development. But there's a little bit more that comes with this. So we know that one of the most important things with career development is your career knowledge. And this is where some of my research is coming in that what we're learning from the students is that the skills and abilities and education needed for diverse occupations, they're better understanding what is needed for them to change career paths or to get advancement in their current path. And they have more understanding of the skills they have and how to apply them. They also are better understanding career pathways and, most importantly, the changes in the labor market that we're experiencing and will continue to experience. What does that mean to them and how are they going to navigate it? Really helps them understand areas they're already strong in and areas they might want to do more development. And the last one is, you can have, my experience as a career counselor, you can have this understanding of the labor market and where are the jobs and where are they being created. But if you don't know how to articulate that to an employer, if you don't know how to put that on LinkedIn or share it in an interview or maybe in a networking event or articulate it in your resume, you're really missing one of the key ingredients. And the early survey findings from my research shows that students that have gone through the PLAR process, and I'm assuming more research needs to be done on this, but I'm assuming it's that self-reflective element that they're better able to articulate their skills. So that's some really important findings that we've guessed at before, but we haven't been able to prove. And then when you overlay that on career decision-making, going through the PLAR process helps students understand themselves and what motivates them. And so it helps them navigate their career more strategically and more intentionally because they've got such strong understanding. And that might be with their interests, their skills, their talents, their abilities, their personality values, the different types of PLAR that students go through. All of this is uncovered to certain degrees. But I would say that going through competency-based PLAR is helps surface these more than the other types of PLAR. And then I'm just going to blend back. Traditional career theory tells us that there's a really strong correlation between confidence and career decision-making. And as we've talked about with the impact of career on self or impact of PLAR on self, that confidence does go up in a number of different ways. And so it makes that career decision-making much more comfortable and done with more certainty. And then just a few more early research indications. Students tend to experience an increase in their professional self-confidence. So kind of back to that different types of confidence they can have, but it's that professional identity and who they are. And again, this is one that we've anecdotally thought was the case, and we hear lots of students talking about it, but we haven't been able to measure it before, or it hasn't been measured that I've been able to find. And then that means that there's a higher propensity for career action. So, you know, you get that four pieces. You've got a better understanding of themselves, a better understanding of what the labor market's doing and how to position themselves in that labor market. And then it's like the Nike commercials, then they do it. And, you know, if you're missing any one of those four elements, that career development can be quite a challenge and really limiting. But PLAR just helps set up all of that foundation, those four pieces, so that they're more strategic and intentional. And tying that back to the labor market changes we're going through, the need for lifelong learning, credential creep in education, career development changes, PLAR impacts not just their employability, but their agility, their career resilience, and their career progression. And so just 2 slides, and then I really want to spend the rest of our time getting your thoughts. For those of you who are on the webinar today that are career counselors and wondering, okay, how do I find out more about PLAR? Hopefully you go to the BC Plan website and use that as your place to start and find out what schools are there. Then when you get to research the schools, you may need to do a little bit of detective work, which might require some patience and persistence. And just some keywords: prior learning, PLAR, RPL, advanced entry, and speaking directly to recruiting or admissions officers, program advisors, or recruitment advisors, and sometimes even go right to the chairs or the deans. That's where you can get the most answers, because very few schools in the province have centralized PLAR offices. So you kind of have to find this out on your own. And then just if you're helping students go through the PLAR process, it's very much like what you'd be working with them on their resume development. You ask them a lot of probing questions, help them pull out what their learning is, what evidence do they have, help them reflect on it. A lot of times they don't have the vocabulary and you're helping them surface it. So again, very much like when you're helping them develop a resume, help them make explicit what they've discovered and what that experience translates into it in terms of learning. And again, I just put in there that it's all about the reflecting on the experience and reflecting to pull out the learning. It's never only about the experience. Okay, so in the chat feature, that was the bulk of what I wanted to share today. If you don't mind, just what are your key takeaways from today? And is there any one thing you're going to do today or tomorrow with this information?
So is there a slide after this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got Okay, I'll let you guys put in the chat and I'll go to my next slide.
Okay.
You might have noticed the imagery I've used for all of these slides. I just put it up here again. And I use this imagery as a metaphor. Anybody want to turn on your mics and share why I use this imagery or why you think I might have used it? And that's it. The rest are just my sources and how to contact me. So I can do the stop sharing now. Is that what you wanted, Janet?
Yeah, because
That's what
then we can see their faces and they can ask questions. There's only 16 of us today, so
okay. I had it up to 32, so that's interesting.
Not everybody attends live, so they will attend later.
Oh, my count on my participants was up.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was, yeah. But anyways, so Joel, yeah, it is nice that everything's in one place so that you don't have to, like, we've done the beginnings of that investigation work for you. Yeah. And hopefully you'll go to the schools and you'll ask them about the prior learning options, because they all offer something. It can just be hard to find what they offer and what's best for you personally or for the clients that you're working with. Mm-hmm. And anybody want to take a stab at why I use that imagery of it was, like a big planet with all of those interconnecting points?
I will actually.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
It kind of represented, each one of those points represented a piece of knowledge, and some were bigger, some were smaller, and that represents our life experience. But it was all kind of enclosed within a globe, which to me represents the individual.
Yeah, and the connectedness of, it can be hard to draw the paths between all of it, but it's that chaos theory. Out of apparent randomness and chaos, patterns can and will emerge, and those patterns are usually quite simple. And that's what's emerging for PLAR and career development. It helps. It's that simple.
So the questions were, what were your key takeaways today? Oh, good. Shannon has said key takeaways, PLAR may apply to a broader client base than what I may have considered prior to hearing this presentation, and to review the BC Plan website to get more familiar with it. Yeah, so that we've just compiled the website. So there's still, you might find some areas that are underdeveloped, but one of the things I'm most excited about is we've been working with Progressive Intercultural Community Society, I think it's called, and having a PLAR navigator. So people that are new settlers to Canada who want to work in a specific field, they're trying to figure out what steps they need to take. And through this, the contractor that we have working on it, she's created a whole bunch of different profiles, and we're adding them all up. So you can go on there and take a look at what the steps your clients may need to take in order to enter into certain careers. So that's another great one for you.
Gail, I just noticed yours with the increase in nonlinear careers, we need to have more emphasis on transferable skills from individual perspectives, and also education and career. And yeah, that's such a good point, in that careers are becoming less and less linear. And the more we can help people identify those, the skills they have and validate them, and especially with the continued and lifelong learning, and you pick up the learning where and how you can. So if there's some sort of confidence we have in being able to assess that learning or recognize it so that it's in a publicly acceptable way, it makes a lot of sense. Oh, yeah, Maribel. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to say PLAR. And BCIT has a really rich PLAR program. You guys have thought it out well.
Yeah. And also we've got the research that we worked on with BC CAT as well, to just look at the different PLAR. Susan did mention it in her presentation, but just to remind you that that's available to look at. Oh, great. Andrew's put the link in there as well.
So, and I'm just, I'm going to read Amanda's in a moment. How was that presentation for you? Was there some new information in there for you?
Yeah, we'll send out a survey so that if anyone wants to add to what their virtual thumbs up and ask any questions as well, we'll send that out with the recording afterwards.
Oh, thank you. Rajiv just shared that. Happy to report that the forthcoming provincial framework for micro-credentials will also consider PLAR in terms of this new form of shorter, flexible, competency-based training. PLAR seems like such a natural fit for micro-credentials and to help give it the that recognition in a currency that's highly understood. So there's been a lot of talk about PLAR and micro-credentials and how we can work together. So I understand that framework's coming out this spring. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thanks for mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'll just add that I'm actually going into that meeting right after this, but
Oh.
I expect that in the next couple of months, that draft framework will be shared and circulated for feedback and review.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And Brian Train, who is at the province, he's also an advisor on our board as well. And we were able to, BC Plan was able to provide him with feedback when all of this was still in its infancy. So we'll be interested to see how it all works out. So we are almost at time. Oh, we've got some more takeaways. Chelan is saying formal, informal, and non-formal resources. Honestly, a wealth of information. That's great. And essential skills facilitator in Vernon. So it goes hand in hand. Just after this, I will contact the OC. But who's the OC?
Okanagan College.
Oh, the Okanagan College, of course.
Just
of course.
because they'll do the PLAR. And also, I just have a
Hi,
quick questions about the portfolios, and what would or do you have any resources on like evident type based? That's where
we took a year to develop a handbook for students. It's just over 70 pages and it's a really rich resource. I'll type in my email if you want to send me a note. Don't hesitate and I'll send it to you. And then if you want to talk about it more, just let me know. The handbook is for competency-based portfolios, but it could also be used, a lot of it for course-based.
awesome. Thank you so much.
And if anybody else wants that, just send me a message.
Actually, if you send it to me, I can send it out to everybody.
Okay.
After this, so that would be great. So I think what I'll do is just wrap it up there, and thanks, Susan, so much. You can see how exciting she is to work with, because she truly believes in the work that's being done, and your enthusiasm is infectious. So I'm so pleased to be able to work with you all on all this. And as I mentioned, this is our first webinar, and the recording will be put onto our website. We do have other recordings as well. And I would like to introduce you to our next webinar, which will be on April 28th. And it will feature Justine. Is Justine? Oh, there she is, Justine Arsenal and Kevin Wainwright. And the webinar series topic is economic impact of prior learning assessment in BC. So if you're working for an organization, say a post-secondary institution, and your funding is on the verge of being cut or is being held back, we will have a financial model for you to prove how important PLAR is. And it will only prove more important as more information about the micro-credentialing comes out as well. So thank you to everybody for your time here today. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again, Susan, and also Andrew, for setting all of this up for us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.